Good day, friends. Welcome to another Word of Gord. We've spoken, and I've also written in blogs and whatnot, various books about retrievals at disaster sites. And that has generally focused on what one, like myself or yourself, who wishes to project, either during meditation or at night when asleep, to a disaster site and help out, picking up the souls trapped in bodies that the permanent astral plane residents who are there to do rescues cannot reach. I've spoken about this several times now, and seek to give you an idea of how it appears on the other side. I'm going to be quoting from a book called Surfing into Paradise, channeled by Sigrid Kristy about 15, 17 years ago, in response to the Asian tsunami of, was it 2004 perhaps, that took away well over 200,000 people from Indonesia, Bali, various places where those giant waves crashed. And this book gives a very good idea of how the spirit world prepares and acts in such situations. And I think it's appropriate now, particularly since the earthquake in Turkey and Syria, which seems to have taken well over 40,000 in maybe not a day, but 2 or 3, fairly quickly. So I'm going to read, it's a 200-page book, so it's only about 115. But there's quite a lot of commentary by various participants. So I will be editing, trying to give an overall view. Each person that is channeled by this Sigrid Kristy has a different role to play. And you can see that was all carefully planned out, as well as the actual retrieval work. 2nd January 2005. I'm an Australian ex-surfer from Bondi Beach. Can you hear me clearly? Yes, I can. This is quite a surprise. Thank you so much for coming through. It's my privilege to begin this story from our side of life in heaven. Others will take up their parts as we move through the whole documentary, which has been collated very quickly for you and the world's benefit. The aftermath in these realms is still being sifted through stage by stage. But I must state here that our time is considerably faster than yours. We do not have time as you know it, but we do in our own sense. We can make time go forwards and backwards with thought, which is the basis of our existence. Thought, mental and emotional, creates our surroundings, our activities, our visions, our ambitions, our work and spiritual development. In this horrendous disaster you have suffered on earth, our thought wavelengths have been magnified to help us help you in these devastating circumstances. We knew long before your Christmas that this super earthquake was to take place. How do you warn a world which is in the main ignorant of our existence? Many of you believe in an afterlife in a vague way, that you will go to heaven and perhaps meet loved ones gone long before you, and maybe Jesus or any other religious figurehead. But how many of you, if any, are aware of our amazing rescue services? Brothers and sisters on earth, you do not stand alone in these times of devastation. We are with you every step of the way, before, during, and after the terrible events which tear your minds and hearts apart. I was no different to you. My attitude to physical life was that if there was something of life beyond death, show me. Well, nobody did. So I came here totally unprepared for a new existence because I didn't take any time to look into it. I thought I knew it all, and I found I knew nothing, and felt pretty silly as I got to know how ignorant I had been. When the alarm bells rang out loud and clear in our realms of this pending earthquake below the sea, and the call for experienced surfers went out, I enlisted straight away. It was my personal opportunity to thank God for keeping me safe and happy in lower heaven, and to do something for the cause, which is likely to be the biggest catastrophe in modern times. I wanted to be in on the scene and help others into heaven, the heaven I had come to know. When I was approached to give this communication contribution and take part in this special documentary for Earth, I was completely taken aback, but very honored. I know many of you will want to throw the likelihood of this being true and sincere out the window, whilst others will take it on board and want to know more about our life after death. You're all coming here anyway one day. The poor victims of this appalling natural tragedy have arrived here sooner, far sooner than they expected. None of us know the day or hour when it will be our turn. Bear that in mind. If you can begin to accept now, it may be easier for you when the time comes to settle down into your new life. For those caught totally unaware as the huge waves crashed into the beaches on the Indian Ocean zone, there is now quite a period ahead of accepting the shock and confusion of the sudden happening. But this part will be narrated by others. For the moment, please know that they are safe and alive in our lower heaven called the Summerlands. Let me begin my story now by enlisting as a member of the surfing teams, how I did it, which I can tell you, it ran into thousands. We assembled at the auditorium to be given this initial talk of instructions, and it was like standing in a crowded stands of a football match, and our auditorium pitch was one of several. It blew my mind completely as we watched a film on a large screen that we had in front of us about the rescue operation. You might interrupt me here and say, what's the need of rescuing souls anyway? They'll automatically go to heaven. Well, they do, but let's just say they need a little guiding hand to have it go really smoothly. So here I was with some thousands of other volunteers watching the horror film. No detail was left out, I can tell you. This was to test just how much we were prepared to do the task, and if we wanted to pull out now, well, this was the time to speak up. I had to admit I was in two minds. Well, this was the time to speak up. I had to admit, but something held us back, and it was like a wave of radiance surrounding us, and when that strength ebbed away, no one flinched a muscle. It was as if God held us in his loving power, and he would look after us to look after others. It was as simple as that. Well, that was the beginning. Personal interrogations came next, talking to an experienced rescue officer who probed into every nook and cranny of your soul, testing your reactions to the various likely reverberations of the operation ahead. By the time you came out of those sessions, you felt like you had been verbally pummeled into the ground. But I'm glad now, because when the reality came, I felt more confident of my true motives and actions. At the same time, nothing really prepared us for the enormity of the task. Next came the practice runs at sea, surfing the biggest waves I had ever seen. The organizers purposely set up a storm to make it really choppy. We were taken out in large boats a little way from the shore and turned into the ocean, 100 at a time, to surf back to the beach. I'll never forget that first time, as we were lowered into the water, surfboard in readiness to catch the next wave as it thrust the boat on top. We took our cue and began to ride the crest. 100 others were doing the same, desperately keeping their balance like myself. Our previous land drill had taught us to hold ourselves proud in thought, to create a stable mind and concentration. And it worked. Amazingly, we all made it to the sand and collapsed in relief. Over the weeks, we were taken farther and farther out to sea to ride the waves back to shore, and they kept getting bigger. The next stage was to actually ride through the waves, and some were up to nearly 50 feet high. Boy, did I sweat over that first practice run. I was so scared I just couldn't think at all. My legs went to pulp, my arms hung helplessly by my side, my stomach turned over and my head just swam around. Luckily, an instructor was right behind me, surfed along beside me, and we went through together. Boy, oh boy, what an experience. This was the real test. We were to grab the snorkels strapped around our waists, slip them over our noses, and dive into the foaming water as it began to crash onto the sand and reach out for the nearest body floating up to the surface. It's interesting to me that snorkels would be needed for spirit beings, but, I'll hold back on that. A huge fleet of whitewater rafts followed behind us to deposit each body before going back to collect another, and so on. Speed was of the essence. 100 of us gathered every make-believe body from the flooded shore. As the last one was safely laid on a raft, the scene changed miraculously like a film, and we found ourselves riding the dozens of life-saving rafts over gentle waves into another calm and very beautiful beach, where the rescued bodies were laid quietly under palm trees to rest. Our training also involved understanding the ejection of the soul body from each physical carcass as the drowning took place. On the day we would not be dealing with corpses, but live etheric counterparts in a state of shock and confusion. They would also be floating gently up to the surface, but they would be speaking to us in thought, maybe even protesting our presence. That may sound strange since they had drowned and should be grateful to be rescued, but they would not necessarily be aware that they were dead. Grabbing a body was one thing, but dealing with bewilderment and resentment was another. Can you imagine for a moment lying on the beach in the sun feeling very relaxed when all of a sudden the cry of alarm goes up as the first monster wave is seen coming towards shore? Panic, terror, frenzy. You have no time to get away as moments later you are engulfed in the overwhelming torrent. Your breathing is choked, your senses pass out, and your invisible soul body immediately ejects from your physicality. The first stage of death. Nature has provided this incredible backup body, a perfect replica of the earthly one, as an escape route out of your worldly life for the first stage into a new survival. Thousands have made a part-time pull-out during a heart attack, operation, severe coma, or fever, but have been returned to their physical life to tell the tale. But in this particular case, the drowning, it was for real. In seconds, you are in physical life 1 minute, then floating and breathing through water the next. Then we would turn up wearing snorkels, adding to the general drama and growing casualties floating around under the sea. As we firmly stretched out our arms to grab an arm or slip them round a waist, if we were lucky, the protests began. "What the hell's going on? Don't you dare grab me like that." And that's putting it mildly. "Sorry to upset you, lady, but we're here to help you back to safety." "I don't need your help. I can swim. How do I know you're not some male molester taking advantage of me?" You don't, to be honest, but if you care to look upwards, you'll see a beautiful radiance shining down you from heaven. Heaven? What are you talking about? I'm having a bad dream, that's what. Go away so I can wake up. Well, we couldn't float around arguing the matter. Our instructions were to carry them all, kicking and screaming, if necessary, onto a raft as quickly as possible, where they would be immediately sedated to forget the trauma. They would all wake up in heaven much later and much calmer. Meanwhile, as each lay in a raft, the fine umbilical cord, which was still attached to the physical carcass, would snap and dissolve, with the help of a medical expert on board. Well, I didn't really think the umbilical cord needed anyone to snap it. I thought it snapped itself, but I could be wrong. You might ask at this point what we're doing wearing snorkels if we could breathe under the sea like the drowned victims in their ejected soul bodies. You're right, but we needed to wear them to distinguish us as rescuers, as opposed to those needing rescuing. There would be enough confusion in the water, so this was our uniform, you might say. Another question you might ask is, why did we not let them make their own way to safety? Well, to where? Remember, they were still within earthly vibrations, and we would have had to lower ours considerably beforehand to reach them for the rescue. The turbulent sea was flooding everywhere inland. There was no beach left. They had made it back to shore as new invisible spirits. Their bewilderment would have been even greater because no one would see them on Earth anymore. They would perceive the devastation around them and have no means to do anything about it, ending up earthbound and stranded in an alien landscape completely smashed by the torrent, until other rescuers came to persuade them to turn to the light and help them go forward into their true place in the heavenly realms. Far better we push them into the full change there and then. As for the dark tunnel, which is often described in near-death experiences, in this particular disaster, this phase was obliterated by such a huge mass passing into spirit almost simultaneously. The reason being that our mass presence within the rescue operation creates enormous deluge of soul consciousness in one accord. The continuous healing radiance shining down in protective upliftment from heaven before, during, and for some months afterward opened the doors very wide for a universal transference into the higher dimensions when the rescue work was complete. As the last new soul was gently laid on a raft, we would be airlifted, as you might say, en masse into the lower heavenly domains where all those we had safely connected on Earth were there. We were positioned in large ships, hours in advance before the underwater earthquake. On board, we tried to relax amongst each other while waiting in anxious trepidation. Each ship was moored mid-ocean near the designated area for rescue. Ours and others were lined up for the coast of Thailand. As the first rumblings were monitored on our screens, we were lined up on deck like an army inspection parade to check we had everything we needed. As I say, I'm editing a bit here. It all happened so quickly we didn't have time to think except to concentrate upon keeping our balance as we reared up the last huge wave as its ridge curled over to begin crashing hard toward the beach. I just about managed to hang on as I surfed above the foam before diving into the swirling waters to seek my first soul body for rescue. We dived into unbelievable chaos, bodies flying in all directions. You just didn't know where to start. Then the miracle happened. Like a fast-moving camera slowing down, the scene before us changed into a tranquil undulation of detail, which became easily discernible. Instead of a raging ocean tearing everyone apart, there was a clear lineup of soul bodies floating quietly up to the surface. It was heaven's amazing magic to help us carry out our rescue operation in peace and quiet. Heaven had purposely slowed down her clocks to allow us real time for our tasks. With little difficulty, I cradled a child in my arms and took her to a raft. Several more followed. The first lady I swam up to was a little panic-stricken, but I managed to calm her enough to put my arm around her waist, and soon under her legs to lift her to the raft. Then she fell asleep. Next came two men who were somewhat resentful of my presence. Who did I think I was, grabbing them by the hands? Each tried to fight me off. I hung on, trying to explain my purpose. They wouldn't believe me. But the nearest companion to me in the water came to my rescue, a young female surfer. That did the trick, and between us we escorted each one to a raft. Later, an old lady who was really sweet and seemed to be quite resigned to my help. So more retrievals there. Part 2. This is another character altogether. I'm calling you from an aircraft resembling a large helicopter flying over the whole area of the Indian Ocean earthquake zone. We are as close to the earthbound vibrations as we can get and are taking a wide bird's eye view of the general devastation all around, resulting from the terrible eruption. Already your physical world has responded to the SOS. As I speak to you, we are high enough to view the general colouring of the water-torn landscapes. from Thailand and Indonesia in the east to Sri Lanka, India, and Maldive Islands to the west. All the main territories and many small islands badly hit by the high waves thundering onto the land. We are flying silently and unseen by your eyes on Earth and carry the most advanced equipment for geographical surveillance to perceive the details of the devastation, plus magnified telepathic and emotional pickup perception from the stricken population. Our reconnaissance is to ascertain all the needs of your survivors and helpers, where there is help and where there isn't, what kind of help is needed and how this can be instigated. Our supersensitive monitors pick up signals and information beamed to us from the various vibration levels on Earth, such as individual thought patterns, community motivation, group endeavor, emergency alarms, hysteria, terror, anguish, shock, pain, grief. And in particular, feedback received from our enormous contingencies of souls helping all they can on ground level, unseen. Our work began prior to the eruption, not only in the now stricken areas, but all around the world among leaders and politicians, who would be the ones to organize the emergency relief. Every national leader is shadowed by more than one guide or relative from our dimensions. Every appropriate aid and charitable organization headquarters is shadowed by a team of our representatives, and every family with a likely victim from the disaster is given counselors, plus comforters from their own spirit relatives. Our planning beforehand is the most intricate schedule imaginable. Everything and everybody must be firmly in place well in advance. Our aim initially is to save as many lives as possible, and our aim immediately after the event is to rally the emergency help as quickly as possible. After the days and weeks pass, the emergency help as quickly as the days and weeks pass, our aim is to direct everyone's mind in the physical life towards the smoothest operation and a deep commitment to rehabilitation. As the tsunami struck Earth, your greatest disadvantage was having to cope with the speed and devastation of people, buildings, towns, and landscapes, all being annihilated so quickly with hardly a warning. So to try to offset this shock of such an unpredictable catastrophe, the highest realms of heaven in the sphere of light sent an enormous strength of healing radiance into your physical wavelengths to considerably boost the general moral and mental resilience of everyone caught in one capacity or another. Vibration levels of health and vitality are heightened in advance, plus mental alertness, mental courage, and emotional strength of mind. Later. Time is also on our side. Unlike your world, we can slow down the so-called clocks to stretch the availability of emergency action to the maximum. What may be seconds and minutes to you become 10, 20, and 30 to us, and if necessary, hours to carry out intricate schedules of help and support. For those suffering pain and agonizing injuries, waiting hopelessly for comfort, or those stranded unable to free themselves, and also waiting for help, we speed the time up, so it only seems a very short while before they are attended to. In this enormous tragedy, the retrieval of the multitudes of dead bodies was perhaps the most arduous labor, and indeed the most upsetting for all parties involved. We cannot underestimate this enormous task on Earth, as you will agree from your own many reports. And we cannot describe the weight of responsibility for all our carers who painstakingly guided your teams of hard endeavor to collect and locate as many as possible of those who were desperately seeking survival of their loved ones. The anguish and torment was monitored very deeply in our dimensions, motivating more radiance and healing rays to be infiltrated into your atmosphere wherever it was needed, to try to cushion the demented spirits of the devoted families, pleading for news. Apart from meeting those who had passed into our dimensions from drowning, past relatives attached to all the casualties were divided between heaven and earth. Some remained within our vibration levels to comfort the so-called dead, and others were on hand to comfort and support those in need throughout your own devastated aftermath. Many ex-doctors and nurses from our lower heaven took it upon themselves to be present in all the makeshift hospitals, and indeed any major hospital, which took in the countless injured victims. Their main task was to coordinate as much as inspiration as possible to aid the poor and crowded conditions of the patients, and to bring utmost strength and endurance to bear upon the teams of medical staff working around the clock. Food relief for the starving populations cut off from their normal supplies was allocated particular importance. Your own contingencies of imported supplies are very strongly shadowed by land, sea, and air, as well as for each localized inland city and town stretching out a helping hand. In short, wherever there was a need, we were there to help it along. And if political deadlocks held up progress, our negotiators worked overtime to try and convince the minds of the arbitrators that the emergency was far greater than their selfish ideals. My original career on Earth was an officer in the Army during the Second World War, during which we became used to the devastation as bombs dropped and guns fired to kill. Bodies everywhere. I arrived in these realms in the middle of it all and was pretty confused myself for some time. But in a way it prepared me for this kind of rescue work in spirit. When I had settled in and joined the other teams on disaster projects, I was offered training in the Air Force to expand my experience. This I accepted readily as a change from operating solely on land. A team of experts in this telepathic signaling, sort of like a form of mobile phone communication using pure thought, are aboard this special helicopter, deciphering and analyzing all the incoming information continually and sending out the required help and answers to the problems being encountered on ground level by our spirit team, infiltrating as much inspiration and upliftment as possible. My co-pilot and I control this flight from a cockpit that is a mastery of simple telepathic techniques. If we think in our minds the command, "Please cruise ahead," the beautiful craft obeys instantly, and in the same way reacts obediently if we reduce our accel speed, forwards, backwards, or downwards. Distance is measured in vibration wavelengths and fed into a monitor at our request. Its fuel is the ether through which it travels, which is purified and recycled upon entry into our quote-unquote fuel system. Once again, this is monitored carefully by thought and tension to use only enough fuel necessary for each maneuver and not give to any wastage. Interesting. Of course, there are no intoxicating emissions and no trails of pollution. In short, it is silent, efficient, grateful, and a joy to pilot wherever our mission takes us. Just a comparison there. Controlling vehicles by thought in the astral plane. That's covered in many books, not just this one. But so similar to what abductees and contactees tell us about guiding alien craft that they've been invited on board. They're told to sit down in the pilot's seat and just guide it with their thoughts. So think about that for a minute. We are now ready to touch down onto the land very, very gently in an open space where we can camouflage our aircraft in any way required. Its outer color can change according to the landscape so as not to be intrusive to those in our dimensions who value their surroundings deeply. However, they are always informed of our arrival in advance. In this particular case, we seek to land on the calmer sea using our water stabilizers to hover above the surface. Some of the rescuers need a helping hand. They are in need of our special healing radiance to calm the new spirit souls from agitation. The orphaned children in particular, some losing whole families, were given unseen nannies and angelic spirit children to sit with them in comfort day and night. Fostering them with the right individuals or families on earth will be our prime target as the months pass. Sadly, they are particularly vulnerable to abuse, which shocks us deeply in heaven as it does you on earth, but the outcomes will be resolved. Finally, we turn our attention to the sick and injured in the crowded hospitals. Our heavenly helicopter touches down completely in a large devastated area. The team of men and women on board disperse by projecting themselves in thought to the nearest hospital as chief coordinators to support the existing contingency team already struggling to infuse practical thought and action. Many patients are already dying from their chronic wounds. Each ejected soul is lovingly lifted into our higher realms where loved ones await by their beds in our convalescent centers. They may pass from your life in crowded emergency situations, but they wake up in peace and luxury in heaven and receive all the attention they could wish for. Of course, I'm skipping lots here. Here's another chapter. Awakenings in Heaven. I've been chosen to relate this episode because my voice is familiar to you and we had a good report. As you know, I was a nurse in Canada years ago, which I had to leave to look after my mother in London during the last war. She and I have come together in these realms to offer our services of love and compassion. Our journey among the new souls awakening from the ocean earthquake disaster. We shall meet others carrying out their service. I'm speaking to you from a very beautiful nursing home, which is known here as Reception Recovery Center. There are many dozens of similar buildings in this special rescue realm, which have been created to accommodate the many thousands of casualties from your world. Just a quick note, I couldn't give you the exact reference, but there's a number of spirit communication books from World War I and II that speak of, many similar buildings constructed during the times of war to accommodate the overflow of dead. And of course they're created by thought, by those who are particularly good at that. Often former architects and builders, of course. They are looked after in great comfort and have many visitors coming to see them, all their past relatives, all their past friends, all their past work associates. My own nursing care has been to explain to them about what has happened, to help them to come to terms with their new existence in the Summerland's third sphere. I'm meeting men and women from various parts of the world, as well as numerous children from India, Sri Lanka, and Thailand, as I travel from one reception center to another. When the drowned victims first arrived from Earth, they were laid out under the palms of beautiful sandy beaches in this realm. They remained asleep for some days, even for over a week in some cases. Their closest relatives stayed by their sides. So we didn't have much to do at that stage except walk up and down the beach in our nursing teams to inspect. During this waiting period, we come into contact with higher authority figures who would appear ever so often to bring true heavenly wisdom. These were brothers and sisters of light offering their long experience in rescue work to those of us who were being initiated into this specialized vocation. Christian convent sisters and monastic monks were among them. Also many Buddhist monks, Indian ladies wearing colorful saris, Indonesian Muslims, and Indian Hindus. All would walk together in conversation and friendship without a hint of prejudice. In the highest realms of heaven, all religions as you understand them on earth are completely at one with each other. Only the colors and styles of their robes and garments distinguish them. Part 4, another being communicating. We're almost at the end here. End of my time, anyway. I am a doctor and psychiatrist from India, and therefore I'm familiar with this part of the world. We are doing our very best to bring comfort to so many disturbed patients after the overwhelming shock of this tsunami disaster. But at first I wish to describe to you the development of reception centers in other buildings. This vast area of the rescue realm has been created from natural ether in our atmosphere through manifestation. Experts first painted, quote-unquote, painted the scenery, the landscape, the vegetation, the coastline and sea beforehand. While the rescue work was taking place, the architects began to build the numerous reception centers, enough to house the thousands of new souls transported into our dimensions. Every design had been carefully planned weeks ahead. It all took place like a fast-moving film. I came here before the disaster took place and watched the amazing transformation as your days passed, just before and during the horrific aftermath. At the point of renewed awakenings, all the victims from Earth were transferred to reception convalescent centers, one by one, from those beaches. They were then under close observation. We tried to keep many family groups together as possible. This was a catastrophe which took whole communities into our realms, bringing much heartache and sorrow. My task is now to help you all to understand that grief that comes on both sides. There's talk of life reviews and that sort of a thing, which, near-death experiences have talked about. And I think we're all familiar with that, so we can skip that. All our reception centers are very beautiful in architectural layout and throughout their interiors. They are very much like a luxurious private hospital. Bright, airy rooms, many of them private suites, some catering for married couples, and many more are full family units with a series of interconnecting rooms. Other wards can take up to 4 individuals for company and comfort, while the children's wards were small dormitories with a play area for each child beside their bed and a huge nursery attached. Visiting relatives already in our realms are given presidential treatment above friends. I think they mean preferential treatment above friends and associates. Luxurious lounges act as a comfortable waiting room, and every catering facility is provided. And outside there are gracious patios overlooking gardens and grounds. Food and refreshment is of paramount importance for the patients as well as hosting the many visitors. We may exist in invisible etheric realms beyond your physical right, but we can still eat, sleep, and exercise. because our soul bodies are indeed perfect replicas. As you probably heard from other, channel communications, those first in the astral plane do feel the need to continue all their habits of eating and drinking and sleeping. And that will bring us to the end of this section. There's quite a bit more, so I think I'll do another video very soon. But there we go. There's the book. And I've checked the online listings. It does not seem to be available anymore. So I'm glad to be communicating it to you. And I hope that was useful. And we'll be back again soon.